Amen. So, if you've been here for a while, you might know. I grew up in a town called Fantastic. 3 people know. So, Seymour, if I was to put it lightly, is kind of like the Bow Desert of Victoria. You don't want to go there, you make fun of it, and the people who live there want to get out. You know, like that's sort of the basic. No offense, if anyone is from Bowie, we love you and you're my people. Genuine? Oh, yes, Molly, fantastic, you are too. Bless your cotton socks. Everyone say, bless your cotton socks, Molly. Fantastic, excellent. I forgot about that, sorry, Molly. Oh, but anyways, so I grew up in Seymour, but if I'm being honest, the life that I lived and, you know, the lifestyle that we had in Seymour was actually pretty good. You know, as a family, we definitely weren't rich, but, you know, we always had a roof over our head. We always had a place to call home. And, you know, if there was stuff that our family thought was important, then, you know, we'd save our money towards that and we get to go on holidays. At one point, we had a boat that we got to enjoy water skiing. I did a little bit of motorbike riding. And, you know, honestly, my childhood was pretty good. Like, I actually really enjoyed my childhood. Teenage years were great. I went to a private school, which, you know, I kind of feel like was a little bit wasted on me because I just kind of scraped by in grade 12. But anyways, I went to a private school. When I finished school, I didn't quit. Pass is a loose word, but I did pass. And when I passed grade 12, I took a job that actually meant that I made quite a bit of money for someone 18. And so that meant that I had a whole bunch of expendable income. And like any silly 18-year-old, I saved it all. No, I didn't. I spent it on really silly hobbies like go-karting and motocross. And I just, you know, anything that was expensive, I was like, cool, I really want to enjoy this because, you know, that's my life. Life's good. You know, I moved up here to take a job working for this church, and I got to meet you wonderful people. I got to hang out with you. I get to be your youth pastor. I'm married to my wife, Sophie, who's a wedding photographer. She's currently shooting at a wedding right now. We have a little dog named Daisy. She's pretty flippin' cute. She is annoying, but we do have a little dog. I might bring her to youth one night. Who knows? Would anyone like it if we brought Daisy to youth? Yeah, all right. Wow. Okay, cool. So we get louder cheers for Daisy than baptisms. Ooh, okay. No, I'm just kidding. So seriously though, my life, like if I was to look across the board, I would say that my life is pretty good. It really is. And with that goodness, with that richness in my life, the fact that I live in Mermaid, Sophie and I, you know, we were blessed to get a unit. We have a little dog. I work at this church with the people that I love. With that can sometimes come, when life is good, comfortable can sort of follow. You know, just when things are a little bit good, it's kind of like, you know, you've eaten a couple of squares of chocolate and you're like, I could probably eat a couple more, you know? Like it's kind of that comfortable phase. You really enjoy it. But then when we push on beyond the comfortable, if we begin to get too comfortable in our lifestyle, in the way in which we're living, what begins to happen is we become naive. So the things in the world that we were once aware of, because of our comfortable little bubble, we're now no longer aware of the bigger, wider problems because, hey, you know what? Life's good. It's comfortable. I really don't need to worry about, you know, other people's problems. And if we're not careful, this naivety that we can so easily carry actually turns to an inward focus where all we want to do is think about ourselves. How can I benefit me? How can I enrich my life? You know, for me, over the different stages of my life, and still now, I wrestle with this idea between life is good and then by being naive about the problems around me. You see, so often it starts off, you know, I'm concerned about, you know, the working conditions of the people that manufacture my clothes. I'm concerned about where my things are sourced from, and then all of a sudden I find that I'm getting grumpy because my cafe doesn't serve my favorite type of almond milk. You know, once upon a time I would look at the loose change in my pocket or in my wallet or in my car and I'd think, you know, is there someone else who could benefit from this? And now I find myself driving through the Macca's line going, what can I spend my loose change on in a loose change menu? How can I consume? How can I gain from? You know, when I was once brave to go and talk to that person who was sitting alone on a train or sitting alone in the park or at the shopping center. I now do everything that I possibly can to not step out of my comfort zone. I put my headphones on, I drown out that music, and all my bravery exists in that moment is me listening to a new song that I haven't listened to before. You know, once I genuinely prayed for people all over the world, those whose living conditions I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. And then sometimes I find myself just praying that God would take away my worst enemy. You know, if I'm being honest, this isn't just a reality that I face, but this is a reality that if we are not careful, those of us who call ourselves followers of Christ, this is a reality that we can face all too easy. You see, it's so easy for us in this comfortable, good life for us to lose focus on what's going on in the world outside of our own little world. You know, Byron told us a couple of weeks ago that literally millions of people are currently in lockdown in Cambodia. They have no medical support, they have no financial support, and these people have no plan B. If they don't go to work, they don't eat that night. And here I am complaining that I have to wear a mask and I have to scan in with a QR code everywhere I go. You know, Jim told us last week, he said this horrifying statement that it's cheaper to replace a slave than maintain an old one. Just think about that. It's cheaper to replace a slave than maintain an old one. And here I am putting my nose up when it says that my product's going to be delayed from overseas because of manufacturing problems. Just think about the weight of some of the things in which me, in my own life, honestly, I'm just talking about my own experience right now. I'm trying to be vulnerable and real and say that this is something that God is currently taking me on a journey. God is constantly revealing to me the weaknesses, the darknesses in my heart, the naive little areas in my life that, you know, I've just got a bit too comfortable because life is good. You see, each of us, whether it's fashion, whether it's friendship, whether it's future planning, whether it's material possessions or maintaining an image, we are all of us are in danger of getting stuck in our first world problems. And if we don't keep our eyes open, it will be the easiest tool that the enemy uses to distract us from aligning our hearts with God. It happens all too easy, New Life Youth. So when was the last time you found yourself getting caught up in the things that, you know, if you were to be honest, that really only affected you? When did you find your mind being so absorbed with your own little world, with your first world problems that you actually couldn't lift your eyes up to see God's heartbeat for all of humanity? You know, this series that we're walking in at the moment, the interviews that we had with Jim and Byron, have been us as a youth ministry taking a stance saying that we are sick of hearing people being consumed by their first world problems. We as a leadership team are sick of it, of living our own lives like this. I myself as the youth pastor, I am sick to death of me being so consumed in my own little world, in my first world problems. And so our hope and our prayer is that over this series, what you've begun to do is to see that there is a third world out there. And as Jim said last week, third world problems are our problems. The third world problems that we think are someone else's problems, that's my problem. That's your problem. New Life Youth, that is all of our problems. Now, if you're here tonight and you're kind of like, wow, Jason, where did this come from? It's a bit confronting, isn't it? For us to actually do a little bit of soul searching on some of the things that, you know, if we're being honest, we've been a little comfortable around. But you see, Jesus gives us such beautiful imagery. He tells this story of what it looks like for us, those of us who call ourselves Christians. He gives us this beautiful image of what it means to be a follower of Christ. He gives us a snapshot of what it looks like when we follow Christ, what the outpouring of our heart will be. So we're going to read from Matthew 25, 34 to 40. Now, I just need to help us understand this. Firstly, this is a really intense and dense piece of scripture. In fact, some scholars have said this is the hardest parable to ever sort of work out what Jesus is trying to communicate. And so tonight we're going to tackle this scripture because I think there's so much beauty and so much gold in this. It's not a verse for us to be feared, but just to help sort of paint the picture. What Jesus is doing is he's explaining to his disciples that when they graduate from this life here on earth, they're going to be standing before Jesus one day. And Jesus says in this parable, he says that there's going to be sheep and that there's going to be goats. There's going to be those who knew God and then there's those who didn't know God. And so then Jesus goes on from verse 35, he says this about the sheep. He says to the sheep, he says, "For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me." Then the righteous ones will reply, "Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? Or a stranger and show you hospitality? Or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will say, "I tell you the truth. When you did it to the one of the least of my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me." And then Jesus goes on to say about how the goats had the exact same scenario, but they actually walked past these people. They saw the people in prison, they walked past. They saw the hungry people and they didn't feed them. They saw the people who were naked and they didn't clothe them. And so when we hear this verse, when we hear this parable, it can sort of provoke a few questions. And I guess the main questions are, who are the sheep and who are the goats? You know, when we look at this text, that's the question that sticks out. You see, the sheep in this story are those disciples, those followers of Christ who were unknowingly serving Jesus through serving those that others overlooked. So I'll say that again. The sheep in this story are those disciples who were unknowingly serving Jesus through serving those who others overlooked. And then the goats in this story are those people who overlooked Jesus and they overlooked him unknowingly because of the way in which they overlooked the least in society. You see, now I guess the question is like, well, what makes you a sheep? Like, what's the DNA? How do I make sure that I'm a sheep? Because, you know, it sounds like it's quite a severe thing. But like I say, when we actually understand what Jesus is trying to communicate here, it's no longer this fear whether we're in or out, you know, like Jesus going goat, goat, sheep, goat, goat, sheep. No, what Jesus is saying here is there's a much bigger issue at play than just goats and sheep here. And so then we read on. We'll read through verse 37 to 39 again, and we'll just see if we can pick up something, because Jesus gives us this beautiful tell, this beautiful insight into the posture of the sheep and how we can be like sheep, how we can be followers of Christ, and we can make sure that we don't overlook those on the margins. In verse 37 to 39, he says this: "Then the righteous ones will reply," when Jesus says that, you know, you fed me, you clothed me, etc. The righteous people will say, "Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you again?" You see, the key word in this text is the word when. You see, Jesus is actually illustrating to us in this moment that these people, those sheep, those disciples, those followers of Christ, they are so engulfed in the gospel. They are so absorbed. Their life is a life that is consumed by the life of Jesus Christ. You see, they understand the grace that God has given them. They understand the price that Jesus has paid on the cross. And so as they're living this out, of course they're going to see the people on the margins. Of course they're going to see the people that other people overlook. Because they realize that once they were the ones who were overlooked. They were the ones who were making decisions. They might have been the ones who tried to find their identity in a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and it just didn't quite work out. They were the ones who once thought that, you know, if I can just show that I'm smart with books, then maybe, you know, I'll be accepted and I'll be loved, and then it's going to be high fives and stage dives from there. Then they realize that's not the case. They might have thought they could do it through sport. They might have thought that, what started out as something curious on the internet, just sort of looking because I'm a little bit curious, turned into this nasty habit, and there's guilt and shame. And it's like, if anyone ever found out what I did, then they could never, ever love me. And these sheep, what Jesus is saying here is those people understood that Jesus never overlooked them. That Jesus sees each and every person. As they stand there naked, as they're there in prison, as they're hungry, as they're alone, as they're overlooked by society, these people, these sheep that Jesus is talking about are the people who understood what Jesus first did for them. And so now all they want to do is go out and do the same thing to others. It becomes such a natural reaction. I just love it. When did we see this Jesus? Imagine if that was how we responded to what Jesus said. Well, when did we do this? You see, it's helpful for us to understand, like as a child, when we're like, I want you to imagine you were like 2 or 3 and you were still learning the concept of walking. Think about how hard it was to go from like your kitchen table to your bedroom, You couldn't carry too much, your backpack was too heavy, you had to watch all your things, you ran into walls. And now as teenagers, I'm going to have a guess and say that, you don't take that much consideration into walking to your room. It's because it's just become second nature. Of course, it's just one step after the other. And what Jesus is trying to illustrate to us is that those people who understand the gospel in all of its goodness, they understand the grace and the love of Jesus Christ and what He's done. When they understand that, of course they're going to want to go and show other people. Probably don't even realize they're doing it because they're just so, well, of course I would. Why wouldn't I help that person that's over there? Why wouldn't I have eyes for that person? Why wouldn't I make sure that that person is no longer overlooked in society? We all have a God-shaped hole in our heart. Each and every one of us. And you see, some people in this room have identified that they want to fill that hole with God. And so now it's actually our call, it's our challenge for us to go out and live out that calling. To go, you know what? God's actually filled the hole in my heart. That void that I had, I now want to go out and I want to go and show the world the love that God has for them. It's a story for some of you. See, Jonathan Dodson says this beautiful quote. He says, "The gospel is good news to be shared, not good deeds to be observed, though it clearly moves in marvelous deeds of grace." I'll say that again. The gospel is good news to be shared, not good deeds to be observed, though it clearly moves in marvelous deeds of grace. New Life Youth, I wonder one day when we graduate from this life, when we get to stand before our Creator, when we get to stand before Jesus and God, and we hear Jesus say, "Hey, do you remember that time? Do you remember that time way back when you were in high school? And that kid was just sitting alone, had no friends, and do you remember you went and sat with them?" Jesus will say that was me. Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me. The ones in society that are overlooked. I wonder if one day when we get to stand before Jesus, and He says to us, "Hey, do you remember that day way back when you were in Pac Fair and you were trying to work out what clothes to buy and you really liked this logo and you really liked the brand of shirt, but you knew the people making it, they were in slavery and they were being treated so poorly. They were children the same age as you, just living a horrible life so someone could line their pockets with money." And then Jesus says, remember when you didn't choose to buy that shirt, instead you chose to buy one that actually supported and loved those on the margins. And Jesus turns around and says, "That's me." I wonder if one day we're going to stand before God and He's going to say, "Hey, do you remember that kid in school that everyone hated? The one that everyone made fun of? The one that never ever got invited to a birthday party, always had to sit in the bad seat. They were always laughed at, they were always made fun of. Do you remember that time that you invited them for a sleepover at your house?" Well, that was me. See, New Life Youth, I think we have to be really, really careful. we have to be really, really careful not to get too comfortable. For us not to say life is good, oh, I'm comfortable. Because we run into this dangerous territory of turning really, really naive. And all of a sudden, these beautiful moments that God presents to us daily, all of a sudden we begin to miss them because what was once a beautiful opportunity to pray for someone, to talk to someone, to show someone the love that you've been shown from God, turns into a moment for you to get sour because the cafe stocks the wrong kind of your favorite almond milk. You know, youth, I do not want our youth ministry to be stuck in first world problems. I do not want our youth ministry to be a youth ministry that is known for the way in which we consume, the way in which the gospel in some weird way is inwardly focused. You know, youth, I want our youth ministry to be known as a youth ministry who has eyes for the people that society overlooks. I want us to be a youth ministry that longs to find the people who society has overlooked. Those people who have no friends, who have been laughed at their whole lives, those who just don't seem to fit in anywhere, those in our classrooms that we know that we can actually show them a love that shows no condition, that says, I'll love you no matter what. You know, if you guys don't want our youth ministry to be inwardly focused, I think it's detrimental to the gospel. And there's another quote by Jonathan Dodson. He says, a chorus of gospel voices is stronger and more compelling than a lone voice in the wind. A chorus of gospel voices is stronger and more compelling than a lone voice in the wind. New Life Youth, I do not want us to be a bunch of lone voices yelling in the wind about sometimes our silly little problems. Sometimes they are valid and sometimes they are real. I'm not discrediting that at all, but what I think sometimes happens is we become so focused on our little problems that we actually lose a grander scope of what's going on. You see, New Life Youth, right now, in the middle of our social justice month, term, a bit longer than a month, 6 more weeks than a month, we actually have a chance to become a chorus of gospel voices. We have a chance to begin to show those that society has overlooked that we want to take a stance. To wear the t-shirts that we've made with pride and with joy, and say that we took a stance against what the world says is important, because the world says what's important is the coolest logo at the cheapest price and make most people rich. But actually what we know is that is not the gospel heart at all. But we want to make sure that those who are manufacturing these clothes are given a fair and honest wage. We want to take a stand by the way in which we do or we don't wear clothing. New Life Youth, we have a chance as small groups to sponsor children who are in the care of Byron and other people over in Cambodia. Because that we know our loose change can actually change lives. Think about that. Our loose change can actually change the lives of other people. I did some maths this week, which is dangerous for me to do, but I did some maths. And so to sponsor a child in Cambodia through our church, it costs $65 a month. And so this is how serious I am about the loose change thing. And if you have a small group of 5 people, which most of our small groups are a lot bigger than that, if we have a small group of just 5 people, it's $3.25 a week to sponsor a child. Literally, New Life Youth, our loose change can change lives. And New Life Youth, we have this beautiful opportunity to find the people in our classrooms who are overlooked. We have this beautiful opportunity to show them the gospel, to present to them the love that we have first been shown. We have that opportunity to walk into our schools, to see those that everyone has overlooked, and to show them that God sees them. that God loves them, that they matter to God. I love it. We have a chance to make the world a better place. Not for our glory, but because of what God has first done for us, all the blessings, all the things that God has given us in our life, we now have the chance to actually make the world a better place. It's pretty amazing to think that here, just in this room alone, we can make the world a better place for God's glory. New Life Youth, I would much rather be a part of a church, a part of a youth ministry that goes, you know what, we actually want to see global change, than how annoying is it that I have to sign in with a QR code, my almond milk sucks. I'd much rather be a part of a youth ministry that says there is a world of broken, overlooked, abused and hurt people, and I want to do what I can to show them the love that Christ first showed me.